Hello, everybody. Happy to have you on this special emission of GEAB television. And it's GEAB in action tonight. I'm Rethink Swinkels. I'm a long-term participant in the GEAB, and with me is Marie-Hélène Cayol.
Hello, glad to be here. Thank you, Veronique.
Marie-Hélène, it's so good to have you. We've been seeing each other over the Zoom for the last 8 months. I'm from Amsterdam, you're in Paris, and the rest of Europe in between us with all our members of the team. And it's good to have you on this emission tonight because, well, this month's GEAB was number 149. Congratulations. I think it's really an enormous achievement. How do you feel about that?
Well, proud, of course. Proud we did it. I don't know. No, and we are. It's not the end of the story, but 150 issues soon next month. Well, this month means 15 years also. And everything is very special because we have this 2020 year that we are in, and which was a horizon for us as LEAP. There is this, of course, symbolic figure of 150 issues, and there is this figure of 15 years doing anticipations and learning from doing anticipation every month.
Yes. So what are the plans? Will there be a big party in this lockdown time?
Yeah, well, we'll try. Parties during lockdown times is not so easy to do, but we'll try to celebrate, doing a nice cover, making a little presentation in the next GEAB about that, or an editorial on that, and launching hopefully the GEAB cafes, which is an idea we've had, of course, which comes from this special context that we've had in the past few months with everybody taking the habit of discussing online and liking it somehow. So we are considering to extending the written GEAB to more opportunities for our readers to discuss what's in the GEAB and to discuss with those who write the GEAB. So we are going probably to use this opportunity to launch the first GEAB cafe.
Looking forward to it. It will be really nice to see the first emission of that one. So let's dive into GEAB number 149. I saw this was a really nice cover, and the title was "What Will the Next Crisis Be?" So being in the middle of a crisis, Marie-Hélène, and then I have to see this cover, which asks me what the next crisis will be. I had to stop myself and then started reading, of course. But tell me, why this title?
Well, because we're a crisis bulletin. That's how we were created 15 years ago by Franck Biancheri. What we were announcing in January 2006 was an upcoming crisis, which was the subprime crisis, which we called right away the global systemic crisis. At the time, everybody was so optimistic. There were so many signals that everything was crooked and that there were risks, but it was holding, so it would held forever. And so we were there to warn, to send signals about an upcoming crash of shock, at least. And then what happened is that we switched once everybody came to the acknowledgement that the crisis was there. There was this very doomful opinion in the media. And so we chose at that time, during a few years, the last, let's say 6 years, for instance, for around that, we thought that it was more interesting to also look at what were the solutions, in fact, that were being implemented by the different policymakers around whether public or private, etc. So we, in fact, remained a crisis bulletin because we were still, of course, talking about the crisis, but we were more focused on getting out how the exit from the crisis was being handled. And all of a sudden, we have this, again, very optimistic idea that the vaccine is going to solve everything, that Biden is at the end of the problems, etc. So we thought it was important to remind that the crisis is not over. And so we decided to be back on something more fundamental to what we are supposed to do, which is to send signals about, it's not over. The year 2021 is full of opportunities, but it's also full of risks, very big risks, especially if we fall asleep thinking that solutions are around. So we thought that it was interesting to not just do what everybody's doing currently, which is what is going to happen with the COVID itself, the crisis that we have on the table. We are an anticipation bulletin as well. So we thought, what could be the next crisis? Because what we learned from the COVID crisis is that really very, very terrible things can happen. I mean, what's happening to this? Well, nobody can. Compared to a war, it's okay, but it's terrible what's happening to the humanity currently, being locked down like that, the economy being stopped. So of course, it's better than a world war, but it's nevertheless something. It belongs to the science fiction. I mean, a year ago, it belonged to a scenario of science fiction. So we thought, okay, what could be the next science fiction scenario that we could have? And that's where we made a little anticipation with which we think can happen.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of what you also say with the GEAB, that we are your intelligence for the future. So that's really what you hope to bring with the GEAB. People are actually more aware of what the future can bring if all the trends and developments go into the direction that you see happening. And then the question is, of course, what are we going to do with this information, with this intelligence we have? Because once we know, we can actually foresee and make different choices. So that's also what we are trying to do with this GEAB in Action podcast we're having here tonight, that, you know, we might inspire people with new ideas, new policies, directions that will get us out of the question, out of the crisis. If you look now into the GEAB, there are quite some interesting articles, the last GEAB. So what was your favorite article when you wrote it or read it from one of the writers?
Difficult to say. I guess I like the editorial one, which is about this the rogue waves, where we show that there is a risk for Europe to, in fact, be hit by a second rogue wave or a second series of rogue waves. And so we list, in fact, it's a way to remind also all the shocks that Europe has experimented in the last 10 years, the Euro crisis, the migrant crisis, the Euro-Russian crisis, the populist crisis, etc. And we think that there is a likeliness that the same problems could be back, in fact. And so that's the debt. Of course, the debt crisis. And we look at it because you know we have this systemic analysis. So of course, if we consider that there's been already in from 2009 onward, there's been this series of shocks which has really weakened. In fact, we can say that today we have the feeling that Europe is being strengthened by the COVID, but we are not at the end of our sufferings with the COVID, and there is a huge debt being piled up. And we have the world, I mean, for instance, the migrant crisis, which has resulted in the populist crisis. I mean, the conditions are gathered again for another migrant crisis due to the COVID, in fact, which is hitting hard on the economies of Africa. And so it's another argument for Africans to fly away from their countries and not only come to Europe, because we always remind that it's not just Europe which is the target of these migration routes, but of course Europe is one of those routes. And what will happen? You know, the idea of a second rogue wave shows how much, you know, we are just coming out of a series of big shots, thinking that we are strong. Maybe we found solutions indeed to the previous. What if all of a sudden we take a second wave of the same kind. I'm quoting migration, but in fact, the article is about a whole set of the crisis coming back, you know, and taking us unaware.
No. So it's also why I was intrigued by what you said in the GEAB on the populist wave, second wave, that it's that we really have to watch out for what is it telling us about what sort of Europe we will be living in, and really make sure that all these aspects of freedom of speech and how the media and the justice systems are working, that we are so aware of what also the tendencies are to prevent this from being a stronghold in Europe.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
yeah. So what were the trends you saw on to say that you might be seeing this second wave of populism? What was it for you?
I was mentioning the migrant crisis, which resulted in populism. But the COVID crisis altogether, we see the anger that is well distributed around Europe. I mean, we have huge scatterers of population who are very, very, very angry at the lockdown, at their economies being broken. I mean, so this anger, of course, is typical of the kind of atmosphere that results in populism. And what we see very much is that's something that we've been anticipating for long, is that the first wave of populism was very nationalist, and somehow it weakened due to the fact that it became very obvious that the national level was no solution to anything. So we could have something that, as I said, we've anticipated for long, which is the combination of populism and Europeism. And we always thought that, okay, it was not very good news to have populism on a national level, but since the lots of powers were at the European level, voilà, it was kind of okay. If we end up with populism rising to the European level, and they are already very much there. I mean, I forgot that the last European election has put a lot of these extreme far-right MEPs in the European Parliament. So it's already there. We know also that lots of governments, even though they are not far-right, do take far-right agendas on their account, on their shoulders, because voilà, they try to calm the populations. So we have already this sort of merging already between power levels, real power levels, and populist agendas. And for now, it's supposed to be with a view to save democracy. But voilà, if we have this second series of rogue waves, we have a risk, huge risk. Of this.
But when I hear you talk, it makes me also think about the American system, that in a way, you know, the US in the first place was European making, so you could say that. I think I read that somewhere in the GEAB as well. And the way I hear you speaking, it's almost as if what's happening now in the US is some sort of a mirror that I see the European future, or the future of politics, that we get this polarization and very two states of two-party fragmentation in politics between more conservative and democratic powers. So is that something that you see happening within the European Parliament? How do you relate that to what's happening on the political arena?
No, it's true that in the last GEAB we mentioned the fact, a historical truth, that the America is a European creation. And it's interesting what you say about the mirror thing, because what I'm beginning to think is that what's happening today with the Biden election is this America which is trying to mirror Europe, to say, look, we're European like you are. So, and we look like you, you know, we elect people that are Euro compatible. And it's a huge challenge for America to actually keep on try to keep on saying that it is European, and it's not a fact anymore. It's not. It's America is a European creation, but it's gone its own way now, and that's something also that we've analyzed a long time ago. It's that there was the America of today is there are Asian people, huge populations of originating from Asia, from South America, from Africa. It's not. It used to be the WASP. It used to be the Germans, the Dutch, the British, the Irish, who the Italians, okay, it was very European. It's not anymore. And of course, we are less European also. We also have populations that come from these regions, but because the history is stronger in Europe, voilà, we are more talking about integration in the European, let's say, culture. These people in America, it's a new country, so these big proportions of populations who come from different cultures and who land in America, they contribute to an American culture, which is more and more distinct from the European one. But if America wants to keep this transatlantic partnership, which is very important for the Americans currently, also due to the crisis on the American side of the Atlantic, it seems to be very important for them to keep their European face, and that's what I think Biden is today. But it probably is a betrayal of part of what America is, and that's what explains also the 71 million people who voted for Trump, saying no, we're not American, we're not European. Even though Trump is European, somehow he still is maybe more than Obama, but no, somehow in terms of values, Obama was more European than Trump's. It's very different, very American in the sense of different from the Europeans. Obama was completely Euro compatible, and in fact they are trying to really stick to this European image.
Yeah, and also that brings me to the other one of the things about Europe's responsibility. So if we see ourselves also as a sort of a lab or a laboratorium of a very old one with our old habits and experiences, then we also have a certain responsibility to grow into what is the democracy of the next era, and how do we make sure that with social media we can still keep a democracy that is honest and actually represents the people in that aspect. So how do you see that the European position in terms of the democratic values that we portrayed, and also the possibility to build on those in the coming years?
Well, yeah, that's where we are more pessimistic in terms of democracy. And here in this case, the US, even though the US electoral and democratic systems and the European ones are somehow, in fact, different, not the mechanisms, but the political lives are very different. Nevertheless, both continents, let's say both regions, have to completely reinvent their democracies. And especially Europe has this very special challenge, which the US don't have, in fact, because the US already has a democracy which is connected to the federal level, to this supra-state level. We have to do that still. It's an opportunity, in fact, because it calls for, of course, innovation, whereas in the US, innovation doesn't seem necessary as much. In Europe, we really have this European power level, so we really have to improve this anchorage, this citizen anchorage to the European level, and there is more space for innovation, for change. In fact, it's easier somehow, I guess. But Europe needs that is still not ready. As long as that's something that dates back to very long in Leap's way of thinking, is that Europe, and that's today the problem of Europe, it's that it seems to be very well positioned, let's say technocratically. It has very good solutions being implemented currently. It has opportunities, and it has seized its opportunities to reestablish its value added, reproaching this division of Europe today, is currently being mended a bit by the von der Leyen European Commission, etc. But, and that's what we fear today, this is completely technocratic. It's not anchored, of course, and therefore it's weak. And so if we go back to these waves that we see, these crisis waves that we see coming, voilà, how is the European public opinions how are they going to accept the decisions made by the European level? And so we still have a very weak Europe, which is incapable of addressing its global responsibilities, and it has very big global responsibilities because it's been the center of the world in the last 500 years. Okay, now it's moved in the last few decades, it's moved across the Atlantic in an America that was an extension of Europe, but which is less and less of an extension of Europe, and somehow power seems to be coming back to Europe. We see even the GAFAs are coming back, not back, but crossing the Atlantic because they
GAFAs, what do you, for those who don't know this application?
It's the big tech,
the big tech, okay, yeah.
The big tech, it's probably in French that we say the GAFA a lot. I think.
Yeah, I hear it in French a lot, but I don't know what the. What
so Google, Amazon, Facebook, and all that kind of companies. And interestingly, for instance, we followed the case of Facebook and the very change-making Libra cryptocurrency, of our digital currency. And in fact, it started from Facebook, but from a very American standpoint. It didn't work. They moved to Europe. They built they built alliances with other companies, from the American ones and European ones, from the tech, etc., in order to gain in legitimacy in launching this currency. We have lots. Google. I think it's Google or Apple, which is all these big tech and BlackRock now is a partner of governments in Europe. So they seem to have been, and that's what we call the new America, the new America, which is these very big instruments of power that have been created and that have grown in the past 15 years, 20 years, which were tools of American power, but which now seem to be aware that just based on America, they're not going to go anywhere because America is over-polarized with the rest of the world. And so they are moving to Europe, trying to keep the transatlantic, of course, dimension. And so we see that lots of the power, the centrality of Europe is coming back. It's coming back, but it's coming back on the basis of a Europe which is very weak and uncertain and lacking vision also, and disconnected from its citizens. There are risks. That's why we see very big risks of democratic breakdowns.
What I find hopeful in a sense is that I see what you mean, but there's some, on the one hand, I think in the political arena there is some public indifference. It looks like that there is not a real generation yet that takes on the willingness to bring the citizens level really to this political level as well. But what I find hopeful is that I see more and more the European activist is actually taking shape bit by bit. So there's quite some action from lobby groups on the citizens level that have, but it's very often it's single issue or it has a specific origin, but it's still I think the practice of how to do this on a European scale is being launched in that sense. So, but it's not going very quickly. I think that's one of the main things that we can say, and then it's very in comparison to the big lobby of the business community, it's a very weak one as far as we can see. And to come back to a big issue where companies are, I think, now ruling the world, is one of the articles was about the cyber space and the Cyberjungle, and there were so many words I still have to get used to. You talk about cyber diplomacy, cyber army, cyber power. So it's a big thing that's going on. There's lots of money that is already spent on those areas, and so far there's no real regulation, and it's really left to the market space to do this, and it's really touching our daily lives. It was not a very optimistic article, I have to say. Can you explain, I think, the main trend that is actually responsible for getting us there?
The main trend is this subterranean world that we have, which is made of secret services, mafias, and hackers, you know, and they're all on the internet, and they're all on the dark net, and there's even something even worse than the dark net. There is the deep net, I don't know which, and so there are players already there, many interests of different governments, individuals, snipers, as I said, criminal organizations moving in this world. Terrorism also is there, and that's why there's also secret services there. So we have what we knew on this James Bond world, which now has a universe of its own, where we are not aware, which we are not aware of as normal citizens, but who are acting very much with impact on it. They are not just having wars among themselves. They are. Because there's these cyber attacks that we know of, but which seem to be on the margin of our lives. We heard that there's been already one case of a person that died in a hospital that was hacked by a cyber spyware, ransomware. Sorry. So we see that it's coming closer. We know that in these proxy wars that are being conducted, in Iran, you have nuclear plants which are being attacked, where everything breaks down for a while, but it seems everything can be back. So you know, we have to think about in this crisis, huge crisis that we've been going through since 12 years. We have to think, doing anticipation and being normally, thinking normally. We have to have in mind war, of course, because that's how wars happen. So it seems that war is prevented by the fact that we have a very efficient legal international system with diplomacy, with which, even though they are less and less compatible with democracy, that's one of the problems. Nevertheless, very efficient in preventing full-fledged war between big players. But in this world happen things which can be new forms of war, and we could have consequences of that in our lives. Which is the anticipation we make of the next crisis, which could
because what you actually, and I really advise everybody to read it, because it gives a very it really describes the setting very good. And what I felt when I was reading this is that due to the average age of political representatives and policymakers, for them it is probably science fiction, and they read it and they might still think it's science fiction, but at the same time it's reality. And there's a whole generation out there that actually is using these technologies to get their way and to have their interests better represented. And it looks virtual, but it gets realistic quite quickly. And I feel some sort of naivety in the present policymakers in addressing this issue fierce enough, and there's perhaps a lack of understanding on different fronts on what technology can do, and what we sort of the pace of the developments. Everything is dictated by business, and we just sort of look at it and we don't really know where it's heading, and nobody actually stops it at a point that might be useful, just to make it a bit of a slower development so we can understand what's hitting us. So that might be, I think, one of the elements I'm really interested in, how this is going to develop in the coming, I think it's coming month, in terms of what crisis will appear and how we will be hit by that. And that brings me also to the other very worrying topic that was written about the Amazon, and how this beautiful rainforest with all its interests around, I think 6 or 7 countries in Southern America, So how is this topic? How did you come to select this as a topic last time?
Well, that's something I wanted to mention about the previous one that you were referring to about the Cyberjungle. It's that both articles have been written by our junior team. You know that
Okay,
since last year we have switched from a 2020 horizon to a 2040 horizon, but we didn't want as a generation, or even if there are different ages in our former team, we didn't want this to be, you know, we didn't just switch ourselves to 2040 horizons. It went on with a strong intention of rejuvenating our teams, and so we have now a team of juniors. They are between 25 and 35 years old, and these two articles come from them, and so they are very representative of the world they live into and of the fears that they have regarding the future. Of course, fears are rational fears. I'm not talking about irrational fears, and so that's what's interesting. And just to come back also to a previous question, you were saying about this generational, this indifference in of the people, and this generational issue about the awareness of problems and the capacity to find solutions. And with regards to Europe, that's something we often wonder is what we did as a generation, the X generation, where as Europeans we analyzed that the European level was a place of the place of power that we had to seize, to take hold of in order to impose our own agendas. It really is worth wondering if today, when you're 25, Europe is going to be of any help. And if the problems are not de facto now global, they're not on the internet, therefore completely beyond the European. Of course, personally, I will say that we need both. We still need, Europe is a tool. It's we saw with the big, for instance, that today Europe is one of the most active organizations and levels of power doing something about controlling this big tech. But it's not just that, and there is probably among the new generation this. I'm not sure. You mentioned that there are more and more young people doing action with regards connected to the European level. I think they also tend to be very interested in actions which are de facto global. And the Amazon is a very good example of that. It's not just, but of course, if Europe is well organized, if Europe is democratic, Europe can be a strong player with the Amazon, but it's not enough. It's not enough to deal with the Amazon. The Amazon is not in Europe. So here we need, and that's what today bothers the youth. It's to have rainforests like that disappearing, and the impact on the article is about the impact on the agriculture. So of course the article is meant to call to money also interest in saying it's not in your interest. I mean, you have an interest in saving this Amazon forest with us. So that's the whole idea. But currently, the short-sightedness of agricultural business in Brazil, in particular, thinks that they do the most money now on the basis of destroying the Amazon. And later, après moi le déluge, as we say in French, after me the déluge. And so that's the question today. It's the youth are going to have to deal with issues which are global, of a global scale. With what tools? They have internet, and that's all. Basically, there is no such thing as a global governance capable of integrating.
Yeah, and it's also what struck me in this article is that it's so clearly describing that the present ecosystem and moist atmosphere that we have in that area is due to the Amazon. And if it's reached this tipping point of 30% destructions, which is really close, it will turn into the savanna, which is dry and which will represent much more very dry areas where there's so much need of food that has to be imported and all sorts of different other crises that will come from them. So the whole awareness that in 30 years or perhaps even 10 years time, we create this new crisis due to what we cannot stop today is infuriating in a way. Yeah? So
especially when
I saw described the idea that, you know, in a way the Amazon creates rivers of water in the sky which tumble on the rest of the continent, and they're just destroying that cycle of the water flow, which is really a very bad thing. So it's not only the CO2 or all the beautiful trees and all the animals, but it's just a very basic essential of will there be enough water to grow anything at all.
And at the same time, it's always a question that is the world entitled to decide for a country's interest? Because the article highlights also a little bit the very legitimate constraints that Brazilians have, not just the Bolsonaro governments, but for instance, the presence in the Amazon of lots of traffic, because it's an area with nothing, so it's with no control, with no roads, and that's why they are building roads. They are building roads to make it accessible, to actually control this area, which is full of smugglers, and so there is also a need in the world today of a mutual understanding of every party's interests. There is no baddies and goodies, even though there are of course baddies and goodies, but it's better to try to understand your enemy's point of view if you want to do something else than just move to.
I totally agree with you, and that's why I think it's really good to have this source of information what the GEAB is providing. And it's also, you know, you have to understand what the other party is thinking and what their interests are, and how can we cooperate on a mutual level of understanding. And that's absolutely very true. Just to go, we're coming to the end of this this emission. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Maria-Helene, you talk about political anticipation and what it actually means to be able to understand the future and to foresee the future as a method of also understanding the present and the short-term future. So what can you say about how important it is to understand the future?
Well, understanding the future is possible, and it must be done because it's the only way to understand the present, as you were rightly highlighting. And in fact, it is a tool to understand the present. It is a reason to update constantly our understanding of the present, because so many people naturally, tend to take for granted things that were true a month ago and that are no longer true. So the political anticipation is really about updating constantly your information, because and changing, shifting from the picture. Okay, we have a news. This happened. I keep it like in my history book, and it remains true forever. No, this event that just happened, in 2 weeks you're going to have something else which is going to tell something else about the trend. And so you need to have this dynamic understanding of how the present is being built constantly, without saying that you can't say anything about the future. Because when you understand, when you take into account the temporality, the historicity of every event, you increase your capacity, you increase your intelligence of the future, of course, because the present is being built, but the future in the same move is being built exactly. So the more you integrate the dynamic of time, the better you can anticipate and understand where you are, towards what you are heading. But somehow I find that I consider that what the GEAB does, in fact, maybe 80% of the GEAB is updating information. It's updating your present map of the future.
So it's creating this map of the world. So with all its information and all the trends that are going on, and then understanding what happens when a crisis hits, or when there is an election in another country that actually makes a lot of difference.
But you can anticipate. The election, you know it's going to happen, the election. And if you look in the news, you see what is at stake in this election, who is asking for what problems this debate is revealing about the society you're talking about. So, and it is telling about the future, therefore. But what is also very, very interesting about the future is that it compels you to be it forbids you to be ideological. Voilà. You can't be ideological when you try to understand the future, because the future recalls itself constantly to you. So you can't just say things, it's because that's no, you can't do that, because you say something about the future, you make a bet on the future, and then you check if you were right or not. And you try to be right. And so if you try to be right, that means that you really have to take into account reality and not your ideas of what you would like, what you think, your system.
For you, it's also about a reality check. So it's not about dreaming up the perfect world and then see how we can get there, but it's much more the reality check that we know that certain things will happen, and we can also accommodate ourselves or make sure that we adapt ourselves to these changing circumstances. And that is, I think, something that counts for everybody, even on, you have to count your private budget to be, have enough for the end of the month, so to speak. And that brings me to my last question. So the number 150 is already sort of cooking in your head, perhaps, or in the head of the editorial team. Tell me, just one article that will certainly be in it.
There's so many ideas already cooking, as you say. What is certain to be in it already? First of all, it's as every end of year, December, every issue in December is about evaluation. So there is going to be an evaluation of our anticipations a year ago in January, 11 months ago. So that's, and it's going to be interesting because with this big shock and game changer or game accelerator, like we call it, that's why it can work. With the COVID in the middle of the table, we're going to see if we manage to have satisfactory percentages of success in these anticipations. And in any case, December is always, this evaluation is always an opportunity to look back to the year, take stakes, precisely, evaluate everything, not just what we anticipated in January, but take a look at the year, right were we, what is the gap, the delta between what happened and what we saw, update, therefore, really take stocks and update, and be ready for more anticipations in January. So, there are topics already being thought about. So, in particular, there might be a big article on France, in fact, and it's going to be very provocative about and we compare, in fact, the situation of England in 2016 and France in 2020. You see what I mean?
Okay, well, looking forward to read this. I'm sure it will be interesting, and if it's not in the next issue, it's probably in the one afterwards, because that's also the opportunity that you have to write each month a new GEAB and come up with new ideas. Well, thank you very much. I hope everybody enjoyed this session together, and we'll be back with number 150 in a few weeks' time, when that issue is on the mat, so to speak, or in your mailbox, and we will discuss what we think about it and come back to you at that moment. So that's somewhere around mid third week of December. Hope to see you all then. Thank you very much for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much, Veronique. That was a great and very interesting exchange. Thank you.
Thank you. Hope to speak to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.